Recording the meeting at this time. Welcome, everybody. Harvest Zoom network meeting. Let me start with some announcements, some things that are coming up. The first thing I want to mention is the Pastors Retreat. For you pastors, have you seen the news about the Pastors Retreat, March 4th and 5th? I believe it starts somewhere around noon. I got the itinerary. I don't have it in front of me, but somewhere around noon on the 4th and then ends on the 5th at noon as well. And it'll be at Geneva, Camp Geneva in Holland, Michigan. If so, your cost is $25 per person or $50 for a 2 occupancy room. So if you don't want a roommate, it's $50. If you want a roommate, it's $25 basically. And then the network is covering the rest for you. So it's going to be a time of personal growth. And the way you can sign up for that is Barb has put a link on our website or a registration form on our website at archarvest.org, right on the front page. So super simple. I know, Barb, you've maybe been getting some of those, and now we're going to put a new form on there, but that's the Michigan Catalysts form so that there's one repository. But either way, if you sign up on our website, we'll let the Michigan Catalyst Network know that you're coming as well. So be sure to sign up for that. The other is praying life workshop. There's these two things are the Michigan Catalyst Network is putting on, but they invite us to everything. So that's kind of the beautiful thing about that. It's at Rockford Reformed Church. It's from February 7th through 8th, and I believe it's $10 per person. So check your emails, the email that Barb sent, more information there. There's a promo video. And then the next opportunity is more for your congregants, I think. I mean, if you have kids, this is helpful too, or grandkids, but I mean, this is for like everyone, right? Parenting with Purpose, a half-day parenting conference on Saturday, January 25 from 9 a.m. to 1:30, also $10 a person, and it's at Vriesland Reformed Church in Zeeland, Michigan. So those are a few opportunities there. And then you may have noticed, not on this last email, but I guess that would be the December update email. The board would like every church to sign up to get signed up for Ministry Safe. Ministry Safe is an amazing organization, and there's a subscription to it that the Harvest Network is paying for you. So this is free to you to use. And what it does is it helps you create policies, child safe policies, and it has a robust training system, video trainings and things like that. So you can train your folks on having a child safe ministry. And then also it does have where you can do background checks. We don't pay for the background checks. You have to pay for those within the system, but we pay for everything else. The Harvest Network has got you covered. The only thing you have to do in order to sign up, and if you go back to some of those old emails that has the instructions, one change that we found out, one of our churches was trying to sign up and the discount code that they used wasn't working anymore. So you need to use the discount code M as in mom, C as in Nancy, N, which stands for Michigan Catalyst Network, but we're partnering with them for this service. So use MCN for the discount code. If you plug that in, then the subscription is free to you. So we'll get that information out to you as well. But if you tried to sign up and you're like, it's not working, that's why. You need that correct code. And then the last thing I want to mention is, and really to kind of go live on our website here, I want to give a couple of thanks to Eric Burrows Stone, who developed the website, and then he handed it over to our administrative assistant, Barb Prince, here in our meeting. And she's been honing it and improving it and getting it so that it's ready to be live. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see it. So if you go to, there it is. If you go to arkharvest.org, then what you have on the front page is a little bit of who we are. Here's the pastor's retreat registration. So you just click there and register for the pastor's retreat. I like, Barb, how you put the map here for where the retreat is, so you can drill down in Google Maps to see that. If you go to the About Us, that's where you see our mission, vision, what we're all about. I do think that the church map might be a little out of date because we have a few churches in Lafayette, Michigan that we need to include in there. But then kind of get to know our staff. I know she's working on getting the board on there as well. If you go to the resources tab, here is where we're developing resources for you. So we have our bylaws here. We have a section here if you need liturgies or certificates of baptism and your church hasn't developed these things yet. We're trying to develop these things that, it was just easy to go to the RCA website and download those. We're kind of trying to fill some of those resources in for you. And I think we'll probably work on a few more things in there. If you've got suggestions, I know as new churches are joining the Alliance, one of the biggest things is samples of bylaws, things like that they need as they're moving into the Alliance. So be looking for resources here. If you got suggestions of other resources that would be helpful, we'll be putting those up there on the website for you. And then if you click on the network churches, the Alliance Global has the most latest list of all our churches. So that takes you to their website. And then the Join also has a lot of good information, even if you've been in the network for a while. But here's our process for joining the network. But one key piece that I want to point you to for everyone is our welcome packet. And that outlines, how do you join our mission, vision, values, our staff, our board, our different teams, who's on those different teams, how to partner with your giving as a church, what are the directions there, and then Barb did a nice job from our last staff meeting adding all of our churches that are in our network to the welcome packet. So I think that's a helpful tool. Wanted to show you what we've got out there. And if you've got any suggestions too, that would be helpful to you, let us know. All right, wonderful. Those are the announcements. It's the beginning of the year, and so there's just a few things that we want to go over as well as a network that I think are networky type of things to do that you need to know. One is, what were the finances like in 2024? How did we end up there? And then I'll go over the budget. I want to hand it over to Jeff Snee. to maybe briefly share a little bit about our finances from 2024. And do you want me to share? I've got the financial packet up and ready if you want me to share it, Jeff.
Yeah, you can if the summary or the detail. What are you thinking?
Um, I don't know, maybe the summary.
Yeah, I would think that would be fine.
All right.
So there we go. Um, as of December 31, as you see on the left-hand side there on that balance sheet or the balance sheet there, we ended the year with $88,469 in the account. That includes partway down, halfway down, you'll see an investment. We took out a CD in the at Macatawa Bank, which is where we have our account at. Also, I think that started on December 20. That's a 4 month CD at 4%, and that will auto renew. But yeah, so we took a portion of that. So um, we are sitting good on that. We made some good headway over the past year or the year before, so we've got a good balance. As you see, there's about a $60,000 or $61,000 change from the end of 23 to the end of 24. Um, we are looking at as a board for member churches um, a little bit more of a guideline as to how, if we want to ask churches to pay quarterly instead of monthly. Churches are kind of all over the board, and so we're trying to figure out how to maybe smooth that out. If churches feel they have to give monthly, we're not sure, so we're going to try to look into that and um, see if we can make that easier for all the churches involved here in our network. So we're sitting on the doing good on there. Do we want to switch to the budget now? Are there any
Sure.
questions, I guess, from anybody on that before we move on to the budget? Okay.
And here's your, it's not really profit and loss, but incomes and outflows
Yeah.
over the
Yep.
year.
Yeah. The major, obviously, the incomes are is the 2% we receive from everybody. Um, the insurance, we started workers' comp. I think we started last quarter of the year this year when Barb came on board. So you'll see a little bit more in insurance coming through, and we started we have Brotherhood Mutual. We just started that in the last quarter, um, and I think that's what is that a year, about 2,500 a year, give or take, if I remember
Mhm.
right, as a round number. Um, so we've got that covers liability for us as board and member churches on some miscellaneous things. Um, and then after that, we've got the 20,000 that we allocated as mission support to Bethabara that was paid out this year. So it's kind of we'll kind of go through that in the budget. A lot of it's repeating year over year right now. So, and then there's the staff income and staff reimbursements for for their stipends and for the any expenses they may have if they're assisting other churches or mileage reimbursement, travel, event costs, that type of stuff. So,
Wonderful. All right, let's go to the budget here. And you know what? I realized that was the one thing, the one file I didn't pull up here. So let me get to that real quick.
and everybody should have received this in an email earlier this week, also, I believe.
Correct. Yep.
So if you printed it out, this will be the same thing that will be over here on the screen in a little bit.
All right. Here we are. Just to let you know, kind of the process for the budget was in the month of November, the staff um, worked on putting together a budget, a proposal budget, and then sent it to the board. The board made a few changes to it, not a whole lot, and then ratified that budget. And so we're presenting this for information to you. That doesn't mean we don't want any feedback. It's good to get your feedback and on different things that might be helpful, most helpful for our churches. But to go to the summary here, to begin with, what you have on top is our sources of income. And if you look at what we forecasted for 2024, we got a little bit more. This was back in November. That was a forecast from November. So it was 121,000, I think, in the year. Our budget from last year was 114,000, so did a little bit better than budget. So the churches are really giving. And so that's been helpful. One thing that is coming off this year was the Alliance was giving support to networks to help get them started. And they're not giving that support anymore because we're a pretty healthy network. We should be able to, we're kind of grown up now, if you would say, if you call it. But just looking at the run rates and as churches are coming on board, and this isn't an exact number, but it looks to us with the growth of our network that this is probably a good number, 131,000 for the budget for next year. When we come to staff, the staff includes right now the staff that we introduced today. So myself, Jonathan, the Clausens, both of them, and Barb and Ryan Smith, and also Jim Harrison. And most of us are working 5 to 10 hours a week. One of the things that we noticed in both the staff and the board looked at was, would it be helpful? Because each of us staff, we're working other full-time jobs, like we're pastors or other jobs, and we're doing 5 to 10 hours a week, and then we're leading teams. It feels like we got a little siloed on our teams. And so we discerned that maybe it would be helpful to have a part-time, 20-hour a week executive director that then can hold everything together. They would be on every team, so to speak. So that's why that amount is up to 82,000. We put 30,000 in the budget for that, for a potential future executive director. Fees, we generally know what those fees are, so that wasn't hard to budget. Under protection, let me go to the detail. It'd be easier to go over here. Protection, that's our insurance that Jeff had mentioned, and Ministry Safe. So this is the subscription fee to cover all of our churches in Ministry Safe. Office expenses, not a lot there. Web hosting, you saw our website. Events, we want to have at least 2,000 over the year to do equipping events for our network. We're paying for most of the pastors retreat. That's what that is in March. So we budgeted $1,000 for that. And our annual meeting, last year's annual meeting came in at 1,100, and we gave out one scholarship for somebody to travel. So we came in quite a bit under budget. However, we don't, I know there was a lot of donations at our first gathering, so I don't know if we'll be able to get that many donations. So we decided to keep the budget from last year the same. And then under contracting, we have ordination contracting. So what, Jonathan, you're going to have to remind me here of kind of what we need, but we envision that we'll have teams of people walking with our people that are going through ordination and paying them stipends in order to accomplish those tasks because that is a significant amount of time. So 2,400 in for that, and then church transitional material contract. Well, I'll talk more about this when we talk about our goals, but we're working with right now Steve Petrulia. We have a number of churches in transition, and we realized we didn't have good resources to give those churches. So Steve Petrulia, we are contracting to create materials that we can hand to churches and church supervisors that are working with them in order to have good conversations about about transition to help them through those transitions. So we've got 1,000 in for that. And then there's going to be some travel involved. Jim Poit, who just joined us, has been working with Abbey Reformed Church in that transition. I've been going up to Rehoboth. Mike Drews is going up to, I think, North Blendon. So there's some travel as we're working with churches in transition, but there may also be opportunities for, just the work of the network to travel to churches, meet churches, build those relationships and things like that. So we thought we needed a healthy travel budget for that. And then the last item is, and the just I'm gonna couch this way. We want to keep some money in our budget for mission support. We don't necessarily know all that looks like at this point. We've been supporting Bethabara in their first year. At this point, the board has decided to give their first quarter of support, but also communicating with Bethabara that they need a different financial model because they've been really kind of, I would say, there's a couple of things that have been struggling them to kind of get launched. Some of that is just different ways of planting and things like that. But so part of that mission support is committed is 5,000, and then beyond that, we would look at other ways of supporting mission within our network. And so between incomes and outflows this year, we're looking at being a little closer. We've got some good reserves. And so we would add 5,400 into reserves, still some cushion, but right now we're sitting pretty good in terms of reserves. Any questions on the budget or discussion? All right. I know this is your favorite topic in a network meeting, but sometimes you got to do the important or the what do you call it? Maybe the tactical discussions as well. I would just want to throw it out there. Is there a motion to receive uh, this budget for information?
So moved.
I'll support it.
And supported. All right. Any other discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oppose?
Aye.
All right. I should wait in cyberspace. It sometimes takes a little longer. All opposed, say nay. All right. Thank you for that. I want to move on to our 3 goals for this year. And at this point, we're going to have a little more discussion, especially on the 3rd goal. I had mentioned, so goal number 1, and I'm going to invite Jonathan to share his thoughts at this point. But goal number 1 is for this year is to continue to find ways to resource our churches in transition. And like I mentioned, we reached out to a number of people that we knew, but one of the people that we've been talking with is Steve Petruia. Steve Petruia is a trained transitional pastor, and that's what he does for a living. And he was recommended to us as the person who's well trained, knows this stuff, and can write materials for us, very structured individual to write materials for us to be able to have tools when we have churches that are in transition. So we reached out to him, had an initial conversation. He came back and said, every church transition is not cookie cutter, and therefore having here's the steps you need to do in transition doesn't fit. And but this is what I can do. When you have a church in transition, we could partner together, and I could walk in that church. I can do assessments. I can help them make decisions that they need to make in transition, and then help that church find a transitional pastor if that's needed. Some situations it's not required. We mentioned that to our staff, and the staff was excited to be able to partner with him. But we also felt that we need an initial tool, because when a church is in transition, who are they going to call first? The network. And we should be ready to have those conversations. So Jonathan and I went back to Steve and had a wonderful conversation today. We're writing up a contract for him to develop a tool that we can use when we go into churches. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to what I just shared?
No, I think you covered it. I think the world of Steve. I think Steve is a fantastic transition minister, and I think he will. I mean, his heart is with us, I think, in the Alliance in general, and he has a lot of relationships with some of the churches in the Harvest Network already. So I think he kind of knows some of the ethos of some of our churches in general, and he has family at one of the churches in our network as well. So I think he's eager to kind of be a part of this, which I think is really cool. And yeah.
Wonderful. So we're developing like a 3-tier. He's going to have in 2 months, a first draft. And then hopefully by our Alliance gathering, we'll have, maybe it's not the final draft, but close to it by our Alliance, not our Alliance gathering, our Harvest Network gathering, so you can see the tool. So that's goal number 1. Any questions about our first goal for this year? All right. I do want to stop real briefly. Jim Poit joined us. And Jim, would you introduce yourself? We have some new folks. Maybe not.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to unmute myself, and I'm like, where's the little button? So
Yeah.
anyways, yes, I'm Jim Poit, preaching, teaching, and outreach pastor at Ottawa Reformed Church. Sorry I was late, but I am working with Abbey Reformed. We were supposed to have a strategic meeting tonight via Zoom, but I didn't get sent a link. So so I thought, well, it's supposed to start at the exact same time you folks were supposed to start. So I may duck out if I get a link meeting. So
Nice.
anyways,
Thank you. Yeah. So Abbey is a church in transition. Hope Community was in transition, but has I think, have decided on a pastor. Matt Wolfert, you had a transitional pastor at Harlem, and now you're there. So we're excited about that. And Rehoboth is in transition, and North Blendon is in transition, and Jim mentioned Abbey. All right, goal number 2 for this year. I had mentioned when we were talking about an executive director, I had mentioned that one of the things that we recognize both as staff and board is that as we've been going hard the last 2 years building systems and building teams, it's really easy to kind of get siloed in those teams. So one of the things that we're working on is a repository of information, a central place where each team can put their information, so each team knows what the other teams are doing. And then as we gather as staff or as board or even in our Zoom meetings, we're all a little more aware of what's going on across the network. So that's goal number 2. Goal number 3 is where I'd like some of your input here. One of the things that our board reflected on late in 2024 was, as we're looking into 2025, year 1 was just gathering a bunch of churches and feverishly trying to build systems. Year 2, those systems and teams were beginning to really form and perform. Year 3, the question is, all right, we're the Harvest Network. How do we support our churches best? So the question was, what do our churches need from their network? And then how do we go about supporting them in those needs? So we could brainstorm any kind of workshops that we want to do, but it may not be hitting what you all need. So that was a driving force for both the board and the staff. So many of you in your churches received an email recently asking these 3 questions. What does your church need from your network at this time? How do we go about meeting those needs? And what do you think is working well with our network? And each of the board members and staff members took 2 churches to reach out to those churches to get that feedback. And to date, we've heard from a number of churches, and I think we're still working on some of those churches. But I also think sometimes it's helpful when we're all in the room to just have some time to discuss those things. When you share it all in the room, you begin to see, oh yeah, we need that, or we need that, or there's some shared needs that we begin to discuss. So let's take a little bit of time here. And I would say most of our time tonight just discussing those 3 questions. So let me start with that first question. What would you say your church or our churches in the network need at this time? And by the way, in this discussion, I want to thank Barb. I asked her to write notes, so we're going to capture this well.
Well, it sounds like we don't need too much. I think we're all doing a great job and supporting our network. Really sounds good to me. But one of the things that I've heard though is, and I sent you the email, Gary, is again we have some of the forms that we typically take for granted, like the profession of faith, the church, and so forth. So I think we need to continue to do those, and the one that I'm thinking of in particular was the call form for a new pastor.
Right,
So
right.
as we move forward, we know that we're going to be calling some new to our network. So we want to make sure that it's Harvest Network type and Harvest Network calling form for pastors.
How many of your churches you had like these things come up and you go, what do we do? Like, what new certificate do we make? You had to make a new certificate or, yeah. Matt, how was your call form? Was it similar to the RCA?
I honestly don't even remember, and it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah. So yeah, those would be definitely helpful resources, right? I know you got Mark Withers. Wasn't that a question of yours? Was like bylaws, I think.
Coming from the RCA, where everything is spelled out in writing, and then coming to ARC, where, you know, but that's not a bad thing. Sometimes bylaws can become cumbersome, to navigate through them. So as these things come up, um, an RCA church, and you all know this, RCA church, there's always a procedure for that. There are always steps for that, and somebody's always kind of watching. Maybe protecting their job or something, but always kind of watching. And so it's a welcome relief to kind of not be under that, um, and to have some autonomy and freedom to move about as best fits our congregation. And so I like that. In 4 years that I've been pastoring this church, and I'm not ordained. I'm technically a preaching elder, but in 4 years under the RCA, not one time did anybody say, "Mark, how you doing? I mean, you need anything? Is there anything we can do for you?" And not one time did I ever get a call, to see just how things were going. And so I've already gotten, multiple communication from ARC, and then now from Network, from Harvest, to just see how things are going, and just conversations, that I have not had in 4 years. So that's what I really appreciate. That's probably under the hey, what are we doing well kind of thing. I think our communication is tremendous.
Oh, praise God. I feel a little insecure about our communication sometimes. Like you can never communicate enough. And you're always asking, are we? So that's good. Yeah. Anything else? Is there?
I just would like to say I didn't do very well on my research. Haven't gotten back yet with everything. Just a side note, Carrie and I have been sick for about 7 days, so we're kind of half here.
Oh no.
But with that being said, I guess there are several pastors there. Jonathan, Ryan, you, Gary. I guess from your church's perspective, what do you think about these goals?
Yeah, I always feel like it's helpful to hear from my own church. Like what do we need? What could be helpful I'm as a pastor, I run the risk oftentimes of the saying of my own church, um, God loves you and I have a plan for your life, right? And so I could say, this is what I think my church needs, and there may be some truth to that, but I was curious about what my consistory thought. What do they say we need at this stage? Our consistory meeting got postponed on Tuesday because of the weather.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for me, like my passion areas, and I'm finding some good traction in it, is making disciples and multiplying disciples. So that would be where my heart would go. Um, I think one thing that if I think about maybe some of our churches are small churches, not all of them, but have kind of a solo pastor type of feel to them. And that's a unique ministry in and of itself. Lots of pressures um, that are maybe not realized, both for the pastor and on the church. So how do you navigate? How do you do solo pastoring well? Would be one that would be something that I could see as a need. Not any one pastor is Jesus, so they don't have all the gifts, but you're a single person that's being asked to do everything Jesus did, right? So how do you navigate that? How do you build good expectations within your congregation around those things? So those are a few things that come to my mind without asking my consistory.
Okay. Good.
I'm gonna ask our elders this weekend. We're meeting. We didn't meet on Monday, so we're meeting Sunday after church. I'm gonna ask them the same questions too. I think one of the things that Hopkins is dealing with right now, or is still wrestling through a little bit, is the like not seeing the network as the classes. Because Hopkins did a lot of, well, Hopkins really resisted a lot of the classes stuff because the classes was large, our classes was largely unhelpful. And in some ways it was actually inhibited. It got in the way of things. And so our church, Hopkins, kind of took the like, just we'll fill out our paperwork, you leave us alone, kind of a stand with classes. And so um, right, trying to break that a little bit. I think we're still trying to break out of that a little bit. And so the communications and stuff like that are um, uh, good. I think just the sort of continuing ways of saying, hey, we're here and we're doing this and whatever else, and just inviting yeah, without all of the sort of classes stuff that went along with it too. It's good. I think it's going to take some time. The trust factor, it takes time to build trust.
Yeah, for us, it's the documentation that Gary pulled up on the website. I feel like either myself or someone from our church has emailed the network half a dozen times over the last year. Hey, what do we say? How do we do this, that, or the other? Trying to, form new bylaws based upon ARC. We're coming from CRC. So the church adapting and doing that transition well. Yeah, we're part of ARC, but part of our identity still is the CRC, and yeah, so those documents are huge and not necessarily ever fun stuff, if you will, but more than necessary. So having that there, and even as the months and years go on, maybe even forming a more solidified template like, hey, you could just take this and run with it instead of, because I think at least the ones I looked at, and I could be wrong, but some of them were just other churches in the network whose temple or whose bylaws were uploaded, which is great. I mean, that goes a mile, but it would be incredible to have almost like a fill in the blank type deal with ARC's bylaws that we'd be able to take and use. So that's one less task that these single pastor churches, have to take on.
Yeah.
I'd like to just, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say something similar as far as Ottawa Reformed Church is doing well. It's my work with Abbey Reformed Church out in Clymer. They're in the middle of a pastoral transition, and they're asking a lot of questions like, what's the next steps for finding a pastor? Kind of what do we do? So Gary, I call you, or I call somebody and say, hey, what are we doing? How do we do this? Because we're used to functioning as the RCA, but now what do we do? The other thing is, Abby's asking me questions like, they are kind of out there without not a whole lot of other Alliance of Reformed churches around, and so when they're looking for pulpit supply and they're looking for somebody to serve communion, or they're looking for somebody to officiate when they have elders and deacons installed, and there's not a whole lot of other Reformed pastors around. It's not like Holland, Michigan, where we have a plethora of them. Kind of what do they do, and some of that we need guidance on. So.
Well, I just want to say that our church's situation was similar to what Jonathan described in terms of our relationship with our classes. So, there's a tentativeness, if you will, to the relationship with the network because of the previous experience. But there's also this sense of patience that the consistory have, because I did ask these questions of the consistory, and I had a nice conversation with Joe when he called us about that. But there's still a sense of waiting to see what the network is going to look like, because this in terms of the network is still building. Joe kept on saying is you're building the airplane while it's in flight, and we know that, and so it's like you're asking us what we can do for you. It's like, well, what are you offering? What are you going to look like? Are you a classis? Are you a middle assembly? Are you more like a regional synod? Like what? What could we expect? We don't quite know that yet.
Yeah.
So I think asking the questions of the consistory was very helpful, saying, well, what would you like us to be, in other words? Because you're there to serve my church, and all the other churches in the network. So instead of coming with, okay, here's what we think you need, as you were saying, Gary, it's like, okay, well, here's what what we would like you to be.
Right.
Is more along the lines, giving the consistories, more of a voice in what the network is going to be, what it's going to look like going forward, because it's still a work in progress, just like the ARC is still a work in progress. Mark was talking, about there's an openness to it, and there's not a lot of structure to it. Some people find that very very exciting and freeing and joyful, and other people say, no, we would like to know a little bit more about what the expectations are. Right. For example, in the classes, we know there were scheduled classes meetings where there was an elder delegate and the pastor, and there was an expectation, a requirement even, if you will, that you would attend, and you would participate. For even example, the fluidity of this is where we're voting to receive the budget, but who's voting to receive it? It's just whoever shows up, right? Whoever shows up on Zoom. I mean, more than half of the churches are not participating tonight. And so, but we received the budget where only a handful of churches are really involved in it, because there's no, let's say, requirement, if you will, or there should be an obligation, but unless you have a date and say, okay, we want an elder delegate, or we want pastors to do that, it is a little bit unscripted, if you will.
Right.
I'm trying to think of so I think that there should be a little bit more, and I will stop talking right now. But I think there should be still a little bit more of a formal structure and requirements that, for these types of things. For churches and pastors to be visibly part of the network, even by Zoom, and have a say in it. Because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, coming from the RCA background, and even coming from a Baptist background, believe it or not, where just whoever shows up, you get to say. It just seems that seems odd and disconcerting, if you will. And so, getting back to my consistory, for example, by Kathy Wheeler is vice president of our consistory. She's with us today. And maybe she would want to speak to it. But I don't wish to put her on the spot here. But we're just waiting and seeing. As a consistory, that's the vibe I got from them. It's like, we don't know what to ask of you because we don't know what you are yet. So,
I did. I read the notes that from your conversation with Joe, and I liked your question, which I think is what you're getting at. I think the question was something like, what is your expectation of us, as
correct.
a church individually, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That got me thinking a little bit about like South Blendon, how we're inviting our church members not to just be consumers, but participants in the mission of God. And then how does our consistory protect God's interests and his mission? That's the consistory's role. So getting those definitions, I think, is what you're asking for. What are those definitions, and clarity?
Roles, responsibilities, whatever you want to call them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Not to go down the path further, but I think this conversation is interesting to me. I wonder, and maybe as a network, you guys have talked about this in the past, so I don't mean to rehash things out. But I was in the Pacific Northwest network, and these are similar questions that probably all the networks are having. But do we know, does the Alliance plan on giving us more structure to work off of as it progresses, or is this it and it's up to networks to decide how much structure it's going to have? I know that's a really big question.
I have the same question about Matt, so I'm glad you asked it.
And we don't need to spend a ton of time. I don't know if as a network we've talked about that in the past, and if so, great. But yeah, like the whole idea of, hey, I haven't done it here at Harlem, but at our last church, it was like we have to create a lot of new bylaws because what we lost in the Orange Book, we have to figure out how to do this now. Now, maybe for some people it's a huge blessing, and for other people it's not a blessing. Maybe it depends on your personality and your church. But if we don't want to go there tonight, that's fine. It'd be interesting to kind of see where we're at as a network.
Well, it's interesting, Matt. That's as I'm reading the feedback. There's been some discussion in the feedback on that, right? And I think just to speak to my understanding, and you were kind of in the beginning from your network, right, Matt, on that. The ethos was to not have as many laws, to drive us back to Scripture as a way of forming our ministry and mission, to keep things lean, and in that sense be more spirit-led. Now, in the words of the former pastor of Hope Community Church, Steve Smulligan, before he was diagnosed with cancer, and we were at the Alliance gathering, the first one, he said, Every organization needs a skeleton. When you walk around, you're not thinking about your skeleton, your structure that holds you together. And every good structure should have that, where you're free to move because the structure is a good structure and it allows you to move freely. So whatever that balance is, I think is also something that's helpful for us to kind of keep working on. The other thing to mention is in a call with Greg Alderman, so to give you a sense of what he's thinking, because we've talked a lot about not building RCA 2.0. And I think that's true. But Greg said, there's some things about the RCA that was great that we should bring forward, right? That we could bring with us. And there were some things that is the reason why we left the RCA we should not bring with us. So yeah, I think sometimes it's finding that balance of a good structure where you don't even know it's there, right? But it's a structure, it's a skeleton that's helping you move freely.
One thing, I'm not speaking for my church here, but one thing that I'm curious about, and I'm waiting to see as the ARC forms, because I still see it as in transitioning and forming, which is the type of government we're actually going to have, because it to me it seems like it's turning more into a hierarchical type of structure for government in terms of we get a notice, and maybe it was because I wasn't paying attention, that there's a new executive director of the ARC. I said, really? I didn't know a conclave was called, and I didn't see the smoke coming out of the chimney. It's like I didn't get a say, my church didn't get a say, my consistory didn't get a say, and by the way, for a lot of the governmental things for the ARC, and maybe even perhaps for the network, I haven't paid close enough attention to the bylaws of the network, I'll be honest with you. But it doesn't seem congregational. It doesn't seem, it doesn't seem Presbyterian. It seems more Episcopal, and it's the way it is now. And I can see when a denomination and even a network begins, it begins with certain people who are the leaders. You get that, But then, is that the way is it going to stay? And then because if that is, I myself might not be all that comfortable with it, and certainly some people in my church might be all that comfortable with it. But again, we're kind of on that wait and see. We're giving this the 5-year covenant window, to say, okay, well, what is this going to look like going forward? And I don't know, maybe that's the wrong impression that I have, and so I am perfectly open for people to say, oh no, we're really Presbyterian in our government here. We're not Episcopal at all.
Yeah, and I would say it's none of the above.
Okay.
Actually.
Well, what is it, more of a business model? I mean, what is it?
Yes. Actually, yes.
I don't know if I'm all that comfortable with that either, so thanks, Jonathan.
It was designed to be built more like a nonprofit with a board of directors, and less like at least, and I don't know if this was meant to be permanent, but currently it's more like your kind of average nonprofit with a board of directors, and an executive, and some staff, and that's how it was. I think that's how it was really formed, and the idea was so that it could be lean, and so that I could make adjustments as we go, and things. So, if that holds, then I think your questions definitely are good ones. I do think, at least I'm seeing this in the ordination side of things, being in the ordination team, being on the global ordination team, is that we're building this completely new thing. We call it Pathways, a new way to do ordination. And as we keep asking questions, we keep getting answers, and those answers look a lot like what we had before, in the sense of, no, like everybody needs to go through this. No, we do need to have supervision. No, we can't have, like we're asking all of the same questions that we had answers for already in the Orange Book. Um, we're just doing it in a different way. And I don't know, I mean, it's not all the same, but like I do think that as other elements of the alliance are built, the structures will sort of gradually get built into it. But I do think there is, I would say, and maybe Gary, you could speak to this too, but I think there is a really, really, really big hesitation to um, build too much structure too fast, because that's going to feel a lot like the RCA. And I think it's this kind of gradual process of saying, okay, here we are. Do we need this? Yes. Okay, here we are. Do we need this? No. Like, and just, and it's like building a new Lego set. You just broke the Legos, you busted them all apart, and now we're rebuilding it from scratch, trying to remember what it's supposed to look like.
I was going to say, I thought from the very beginning, and I was here kind of at the beginning, that the conception, as Jonathan rightly points out, that the idea was that we would be kind of more congregational, would allow the churches more freedom to kind of do where the Holy Spirit leads them, and then have a board of directors. And as Jonathan, you just kind of pointed out, kind of more of a business type model as far as the leadership goes. So we would be more congregational, and the churches would work together. And in some ways, I do get what Warren is saying, that we weren't really having a whole lot of say in hiring Greg Alderman, but again, but Abbey Reformed Church would say, they are in Clymer, New York. They feel kind of very congregational, like they just kind of can do whatever they do their thing. And to some degree, Ottawa kind of feels like that way too. I think we just kind of do our thing. So yeah, I don't know. I think that was the original intent, and
I agree,
keep
Jim.
asking those questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree, Jim. That's the congregational. On the congregational level, yeah, we have a lot of freedom to function in that congregational form, if you will. But once you get above the congregation, it's not. It's not. And then the congregation doesn't really have a say in a lot of this stuff. And again, it's just what I saw tonight. Is just an example of it. It's we're receiving a budget. I know we're not approving a budget. But but by the way, my congregation receives a budget. They don't approve the budget. The consistory does it, so I understand that. But even if there were decisions to be made, or is it just going to be whoever shows up on a Zoom meeting? I mean, that kind of stuff. There's going to be then a lot of decisions that are going to be made that the congregation has absolutely no say in. And I think that disturbs me, and I know it's going to disturb my congregation. As a church, local church, sure, we want to be congregational, but that doesn't mean we don't care what direction so the ARC board can decide to, on a particular form of theology, and we don't have a say in it. I mean, our say is that, okay, well, we can just leave. I guess that's our say. That's that's the point I'm just trying to make. I understand the congregational model at the local level, but you get above the local level, and it isn't there. It's.
I have to be careful with this analogy, because I'm a city boy who's kind of made his way out into the country, but in some ways it kind of feels like a co-op sometimes. Like a farmer's co-op.
Yep.
Where the farmers are kind of independent, and yet we all kind of work together in a co-op, and there's a board that kind of administrates the co-op. I don't know.
It's a good analogy.
Yep.
And really Harvest Networky. I like that, Jim. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
nice.
I'm working on my analogies as, in this farming community.
Yep.
I could really stretch that analogy and say even in co-op boards, the board is elected, not appointed.
We technically elected. No, never mind. I take it back.
You know, the
We
board members
recommended.
were board
My
members.
consistory did not have a vote. No.
The board members were nominated. So the board members were nominated from within the churches. And we sent out a nomination form before our Harvest Network gathering. And then at the Harvest Network gathering, we also did nominations there. And then from those candidates, the board, in our bylaws, the board appoints from that list. Yeah.
And again, I'm only bringing this up in terms of when you ask, getting back to the original 3 questions, right? When you ask, well, what can we do for you, and getting to those expectation types of things. Well, we don't know yet because we're not quite sure what the network is.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
All we hear is we're not going to be like the classes. Okay. Well,
In what way? Yeah.
I also feel like we ask for a lot of grace in this because we're pretty new in it. Carrie and I are part of the Covenant Keepers, and we're just barely getting that off the ground and trying to figure out how that's going to work. And I don't know, maybe Gary or Jonathan, if you'd agree with me, but I think in the back of my mind, looking at a director, and I think we're maybe a few years away from really having this thing nailed where we need it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where I think it is going to require some grace from everybody to, until the Lord leads us to kind of figure out how to do this the right way. Because there's just a lot of things that aren't up and operating quite yet the way we want them to.
I think my consistory has a lot of patience, for this. It's a wait and see, and very, very hopeful. And this is just me putting my 2 cents in.
Yeah, that's great. I think this is a great conversation.
As we're,
Yep. We don't know unless we know, and we talk about it.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful. Any other needs out there?
What do you think? I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't remember back that far, but whoever asked the question, what is the network going to be? Or what do churches need the network to be? I think there's an interesting reframing of that question. That might be worthwhile to ask, and maybe it's like asking the same question in a different way. I think that's a really good reframing of that question. Just throwing that out there.
So what do the churches need the network to be? Is that
or want, need? I mean, either way. I think it in one sense. Warren, did you actually ask that question? I'm trying to remember now, but whoever did, I think it's a really that is a way of not just saying we need this from you, like we need, but it's like, no, what do we want the network to be as we think about this relational piece? Yeah, anyways, sorry.
Nice. What do you think is working well with the network? I heard Mark saying communication has been good as they've been navigating in.
Just a word of encouragement. I know there's, we hear that analogy of building a plane as we fly it, right, with the ERC. I've heard that a lot in the last couple of years. But be encouraged as a network, like from what I see coming in new, like as a network, you guys have a lot figured out, at least compared to our last network where we were probably a year behind you guys. And seeing the teams, seeing the structure, obviously that's not all figured out, but as the new guy, I'm impressed. It's refreshing. So yeah.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Anything else? Very, very fruitful discussion. Appreciate it. And I think it's helpful too when you have other people in the room as we're sharing. It just kind of builds off of each other. But that's great. The next thing I have for us is just a reminder, we've got the next harvest gathering, and we haven't nailed down a date yet, but we're looking at the end of April, beginning of May. And so be watching for communications there. I think that's going to be probably number one on our staff meeting agenda the first week of February. The format, the thing is, we got good feedback that time of year is good. The challenge is the format. Is it a day and a half? Is it, like we did before, Thursday night all day, Friday, Saturday morning? The feedback was all over the map on that. So we'll have to kind of consolidate that, kind of discern it, and figure out the format there as well. But what I'd like for us to do, if we can do this, just close our time, get into, how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 14 folks. So for the rest of our time, can we get into groups of, well, the Clausens, there's 2 of you. So, I'm thinking if we do groups of 3, but Clausens, I'll put you with 1 other person. Does that sound good? And just pray for each other. What is going on in your life that needs prayer, and things that we can be praying about for each other? And so I'm gonna split us up into groups, do the randomizer for that.